So it is part of the infrastructure which we need to get ready for our testing. So this can be part of the factor when we do the planning. So if we have this infrastructure and how we plan. If we don't have this infrastructure, how we plan. Okay, so that can actually be part of the factor which can affect our planning. Then is the software can be tested. So it means is the software completed and it's ready for the testing, or it is not done. If there is any missing things happen, so we need to check on the completion of this software and the stability of the software before we can plan for the test. Okay, then the maturity of the development process. So it's always depend with uh, what methodology we are using. So it means when we want to plan for our testing, we need to know how we are going to conduct the testing based on our software development process model. So are we going to test in one shot? Are we going to test in iteration by iteration? Or are we going to have any incremental happen? So this will be affecting our planning also. And then the next one will be the human factor. So this is very important for us to know uh, who are the testers involved. Okay, what is their qualification, how is their knowledge, how is their skill. So this can be actually part of the consideration for us to do our test planning. So human factor is very important. Okay, so this will be part of the factors, the most important factors for now. Okay, okay, so this is actually a test plan template. Okay, so normally for the lecture purpose, I will use the IEEE 8 to 9 standard. Okay, because when we set standard, we have many different types of standard, and we can have our test documentation based on this standard. So the one you are doing for your assignment, the one you are using for your assignment is actually the ISO IEC. It's totally different standard, but the one I have included in the lecture slides is actually based on this IEEE 8 to 9. Okay, so that you can actually expose to multiple different standards. Okay, because different companies out there, they actually use different standards. So it's better for you to know to give a look on different standard, so that at least you can be aware all these standards they are exist outside there. Okay, so based on the IEEE 8 to 9, this is how the table of content for the test plan. So if you see, some of it kind of same, some of it totally different, and some terms which they are using also is a bit different, but maybe the content might be the same. Okay, so let's see one by one. The one in the bold, for example, the overview, the bounds, quality, risk, proposed schedule of milestone, transition, and then test configuration and environment, test system development, test execution, and then risk and contingencies, change history, reference document, and FAQ. So all this is actually the main topic. Okay, so the one without the bold is actually the subtopic under each of them. Okay, so let's go through them. So the overview is same like your assignment test plan table of content. Also, you have the overview where you introduce to readers the plan of your testing, okay, what you plan to test, the general approach we want to implement, because it's just overview. You don't need to detail out very much, because the reader will be still reading your test plan. So you just as a general, you talk about what you are planning to test, general approach you will use, what is the objective, the methodologies, and then if there is any architecture, so you just talk as a general. Okay, then the bound here is what you plan to test and what you don't plan to test, and if there is any important terminologies. Okay, these terms is very important, because you cannot expect all the readers is having the software testing or the IT or the ICT knowledge as you. So when we are preparing any formal documentation, it's a very important for us to give them the guideline of certain terms, any special terms which we use. Okay. Okay. So under the bound here, if you see, we have the scope, definition, and setting. So the scope is like how in your test plan there is a test scope. I think you should remember I asked you to identify the scope which you will cover and the scope which you will not cover. Okay, so here for this standard, they actually prepare like a table format, and then to list down what are the tests they will cover and what they will not cover. So for example, like functionality, from here what you covered is the functionality, and then user interface functional, and then error handling. So this is actually what you covered. So here they just list down all the testing what they will cover, and the testing what they will not cover. For example, like a network, the security, date handling, structural testing. So all this is what will not cover. Okay, so the is column is to list the elements that will be included within the test scope, and is not column will be specifying the elements that will not be covered. Okay, so they put in a table format, but yours in your test plan you actually list down what test scope you covered, and then you describe about it, and what test scope you will not cover and you describe it. Okay, so it's still the same thing. Okay, then the definition is to prepare the table of definition. All this I actually removed from the table of content for your assignment, because we don't really need them. Okay, and then the setting part, so this one is like a table or the diagram when the testing is involved with multiple locations or the organization. Okay, so that is under the bounds. Then the next one is the quality risk. So quality risk is actually where they will have another separate document which is referred as a quality risk document. Okay, where they identify the test strategy against any various risk can happen. So here I already include your risk management for the product risk and also the project risk. Okay, and then the proposed schedule of milestone, yours also you will have your schedule which you need to prepare for your test plan, but it's somewhere at the lowest level later. Okay, where inside of your, I mean after your STLC you need to prepare the schedule. Okay, so here also the same thing, there is a schedule for the milestone. Okay, so yours you will have each of the software testing life cycle process, and then the sub process, and then the start date, the end date, and then the person in charge from your team. Okay, so that is how you will prepare your schedule. And then the transition, so transition is actually the test entry criteria. Okay, the test entry criteria, uh, and then yours is only two, test entry criteria and the test exit criteria. And this test continuation criteria, you don't need it. Okay, we will not use for your assignment, because test continuation is more to, let's assume if the system which you want to test is a newly developed system, and if there is possibilities of any issue can happen while we started the testing, then we will need this test continuation. But for your assignment, you only need test entry and the test exit only. Okay, so transition here means, how to say, the the movement of the system from one phase to another phase. It means before the testing will be conducted, while the testing being conducted, and before the testing going to be end. So this transition will be based on the minimal set of qualification which need to be fulfilled or which need to be satisfied before we can move the system or not. Okay, so that is where we have this test entry criteria, where what are the criteria which we need to address or which we need to check before we can allow the system to move into the testing phase. Okay, what criteria which we need to fulfill before we can allow the system into the testing phase. Okay, so this is example of the criteria. So for example, any necessary documentation. For example, what are the documentation you need? Okay, and if there is any requirement document, design document, so anything which we need. Okay, so it means we need to get it done. Okay, then the second criteria can be, is the system ready to move into the testing phase or not? So normally, remember we have discussed about the smoke test. So normally smoke test can be part of the test entry criteria also. Okay, so it depends with how they mention in the documentation. Is the system ready in which aspect? So sometimes they also mention it like this: passing a smoke test. So this is actually, can be the way how we write, or sometimes we can mention if the system is ready. Ready means, is it having all the functionalities and so on. Okay, then any others, for example, any supporting utilities, accessories and prerequisite is available or not. Okay, then other than that, is the system at the appropriate level of quality. Okay, and then the test environment, is it ready or not? So when we set test entry criteria, it can be different for newly developing system and a well developed and working system. So when you choose your test entry criteria, you have to make sure you list down which is suitable for your project or suitable for your testing. Okay, some documents you might not have, so don't include what you don't have. So for your assignment, you have to check what are the test entry criteria which is suitable for your testing project. I don't want any general test entry criteria which is not even suitable for your own, because your site, you are not developing a newly developing system. Okay, please do remember that you are not going to test newly developing system. So when you said anything about is the system ready, is the system pass smoke test, it's not suitable for your assignment. So you have to include the criteria which is suitable for your own testing, which you are doing for your assignment. Okay. So that is about the test entry criteria. So test continuation criteria. So it means, let's assume we have started with the testing. So this is the first 5 days, okay, how the testing is going on. So this can be the criteria or the situation or the condition which we will check to let us know either we can continually testing the system or we need to stop, because in some situation, maybe in the first 5 days we already see like 50% of test cases are failed, okay, or maybe the system is keep on crash, the system is keep on hanging. So in that situation we cannot continue to do the testing because the system is not in a good quality. So in that situation we might need to stop the testing. Stop here means temporarily stop. Okay, so here we want to decide either we can continue with the testing or not. So that's what we call as a test continuation criteria. Okay, so for your assignment there is no criteria you need to check to temporarily stop your testing, no. So that's why you don't need to prepare the test continuation criteria, because no matter what, you are going to complete your testing. So your assignment cannot be stopped. Okay, so that's why test continuation is not required for you to do. Okay, so this can be some example of test continuation criteria based on test environment stability, and then the bug backlog, and then if there is any large defects or high severity defects, and then the stability or the instability of the test release, and the change of the system. Okay, so this is more to the test continuation. Then the third one is the test exit criteria. So this is what you need. It means test entry for you to enter and start the testing, and test exit is more to the criteria which you need to identify if we are done with the testing. So to determine when the testing has been completed and we can exit from the testing phase. Okay, I think I have the samples of criteria, but it's not there. um, okay, something like this. Okay, the exit criteria, I think I have mentioned to you. Let me place it here. Okay, so if all the test cases has been successfully executed, okay, and if the percentage of the past test case is fulfilled or is it not fulfilled. Okay, so this can be example of criteria which we can use for our test exit criteria, because for test entry we have many things we need to prepare, so our criteria can be long. But when we said for exit of the testing, the criteria might not be really much. So the first thing we want to check is if all the test case has been executed at least one time. At least one time here means for us to know either it's a pass or fail test case, and then the percentage of pass test case. So let's assume from 100%, if you have achieved 95%, then I mean 95% of pass test case, then we can say that okay, the system is good. We don't have high fail test cases. so we can end the testing. So if you indicate 9% of test cases must be past test cases, you need to indicate this is minimum, this is minimum 95% of test cases must be passed. So let's assume if you want to indicate the failed test cases, what can be the maximum you allow to go? So for example, you indicate that maximum you can allow is 5%. 5% of failed test case, for example. So it means if the fail is more than 5%, it means you cannot end the testing. You need to make sure that it can go until maximum 5%. 3%, 2%, 1% still acceptable. But once it go to 6% and above, it means you need to continue with the testing to make sure that you can drop these failed test cases to be only maximum 5%. Okay, so normally for test exit criteria, these are the criteria we check. If the test case has been executed, the percentage of passed test case and the percentage of failed test case. That's it. So we always have very little criteria for exit. Okay. So I recall back, for your assignment, you only need the test entry and also test exit. So you don't need the test continuation criteria. Okay, then the next one, as part of our test planning, the test configuration and the test environment. So this is also part of your test plan for your assignment. So you need to document what are the hardware, software, network, devices, tools, data which you will need to perform your testing. Okay, so as part of that, your assignment also require you to identify one RPA testing tool. So you need to conduct the study on the RPA testing tool, and then from there you will actually include as part of the testing environment. Okay, so all this is about that, about the PC, about any devices or any equipment you need, and then the network, browsers, and so on. Okay, so that is about the test environment. Okay, then we have the test development. So test development here will be to define all your test cases using the test approaches or the test technique. Okay, so normally for your assignment, you will use the black box testing technique for you to define all your test cases, the positive test cases, negative test cases, the numbers of the test cases. Okay, so here our assignment will be direct based on your test item. It means the functionality, what will be the test case you are going to come up with. Okay, so how to design and develop various test objects such as the test cases, test tool, test procedures, test suites, and automated test script. So as part of that, test data generation. So if we need to generate our test data, which we are going to use for our testing, and then test automation. So if we are using any automation testing tool, so this is actually part of your RPA tool. Okay, and then to create the custom test tools or the utilities. Okay, so that is about the test development, and then the test execution. So test execution is to define, just recall back your test plan document to know where you are. So we done until the transition, and then the test configuration and environment, test system development, and now we are here at the test execution. So all this item is what is being discussed here under this part. Okay, so under the test execution, the key participant, test case and bug tracking, bug isolation and classification, test release management, test cycle and test hours. Okay, so key participant is actually to identify the key participant in the manner of the testing effort, people who are involved, their effort and their role in the testing, and then test case and bug tracking. Okay, for your assignment, anything to do with bug, with the defect, managing the defect, tracking the defect, all these I have removed because your assignment it's not having enough time for you to do any debugging or any bug tracking or bug reporting and so on. Okay, so that's why your assignment documentation is only test plan and the test case. So let's assume during the test execution, if you identify any defect, you just indicate your test case is a failed test case. Done. So we are not doing any reporting or any tracking or any reporting of all these bugs. Okay, so that's why I have take out all the bug tracking, bug related content from the test plan. Okay, so here is actually to keep track on the test cases and the bugs happen from the test cases. So normally we will have like a test log for that, for us to, how to say, for us to keep track on that. Okay, like just now we talk about the traceability, right? So for this traceability can happen. Okay, then bug isolation and the classification, the same thing. So according to the defect or the bug we identify, sorry, okay, we need to do the isolation and the classification of the bug, because from there we need to do the reporting later to the development team. Okay, so here we actually try to understand the bug, the severity of the bug, and then to classify in our bug reporting later, so that our development team know how to handle the bug. So that's why we have to do this bug isolation and the classification under the test execution. Okay, so this is some examples of the bug isolation and the classification. So if you see, we have requirements failure, which the defects actually concern of the failure of the system to meet its requirement. So it means the failure happened in conducting the functionality, so it didn't meet the requirement. Then for the non